The smoke curled from the little wooden smokehouse like prayers rising to a merciless Texas sky, and Lily Ashford watched it with the kind of satisfaction that came from knowing she would eat this winter, even if she had to do it alone. San Elizario in 1878 was a sun-bleached collection of adobe buildings and weathered wood, clinging to existence in the far western corner of Texas, where the Rio Grande carved its patient path between nations. The town had seen better days before the Salt War had torn through it the year prior, leaving scars on buildings and souls alike. Lily had arrived 6 months after that violence, a widow at 23 with nothing but a wagon, a stubbornness her mother had always called foolish, and a smokehouse recipe her grandmother had passed down through 3 generations of determined women. The mesquite wood gave the pork a flavor that reminded her of everything she had lost and everything she was building. Her husband Thomas had been dead 2 years now, kicked by a horse in Missouri, and she had spent those years learning that grief was something you carried, not something that ever fully left. But grief did not fill your stomach or put a roof over your head, so she had sold everything they owned and headed west where land was cheap and questions were few. The smokehouse Thomas had built for her in those first happy months of marriage had been left behind, but Lily had the knowledge in her hands and head. She had constructed this new one herself, adobe and wood, small but functional, and now it held her winter stores. Hams and bacon, sausages she had spiced with dried chilies she bought from the Mexican families in town, all hanging in neat rows while the smoke did its preserving work. She was adjusting the damper when she heard the horse. Living alone taught you to notice such things. The creak of saddle leather, the particular rhythm of hoofbeats that spoke of a rider who knew what he was doing. Lily wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out of the smokehouse into the bright October afternoon, squinting against the sun at the man dismounting near her small adobe house. He was tall, lean in the way of men who spent more time in the saddle than out of it, with dust coating his clothes and dark hair that needed cutting. His hat was pushed back enough that she could see his face, weathered but young, maybe 25 or 26, with eyes that took in everything about her property in one sweeping glance. A cowboy, clearly, from the worn chaps to the rope coiled on his saddle, but there was something else in the way he carried himself. Caution, maybe, or exhaustion. "Madam," he said, and his voice was rough, probably from trail dust. "Name is Grant Patterson. My horse threw a shoe about 2 miles back, and I am hoping you might know where I can find a smithy." Lily studied him, weighing her words. Strange men were not uncommon out here, but that did not mean a woman alone should be careless. Still, his hands were well away from the gun at his hip, and his eyes held a kind of honest weariness that spoke more of hard travel than ill intentions. "There is a smithy in town," she said. "Martinez, 2 streets over from the church. But he will not work after sundown, and you have maybe an hour of good light left. Best hurry if you want that horse shod today." Grant Patterson nodded, then glanced at his horse, then back at her. "Much obliged. Did not mean to disturb you. That smoke smells mighty fine, whatever you are cooking." "Not cooking," Lily said. "Smoking, preserving meat for winter." Something changed in his expression, a softening around the eyes that surprised her. "My mother used to do that, had a smokehouse back in Tennessee. She would work that thing for days, getting everything just right." He paused, seeming to catch himself. "Anyway, I will get out of your way. Thank you for the direction, Mrs. Ashford, Lily Ashford. It is Miss now, I suppose, though I was married once." She did not know why she offered that information to a stranger, except that there was something in his face that made the words come easier. "Sorry for your loss," Grant said, and he meant it. She could hear it in his voice. "It has been 2 years. I am managing." He looked at her smokehouse, at the neat garden plot beside the house, at the well-maintained fences, and nodded slowly. I can see that. Not many women would tackle country like this alone. Not many women have much choice in what they tackle, Lily said, but she softened it with a small smile. The town is that way. Follow the road and you cannot miss the church. Grant touched his hat brim in thanks, started to lead his horse away, then turned back. If you do not mind me asking, what do you trade for? I mean, that is a fair amount of meat you are putting up. You selling it in town? Some, Lily said. And I trade for what I need: fabric, flour, coffee. The Domings family has been teaching me about the chili peppers that grow here, and I have been experimenting with different spices in my sausages. People seem to like them. I bet they do. Grant stood there another moment, seeming to want to say something else, but then he just nodded again and headed off, limping slightly as he led his limping horse toward town. Lily watched him go, then returned to her smokehouse. She had learned not to think too much about men who passed through. San Elizario saw plenty of them, cowboys and drifters and soldiers from Fort Bliss, and none of them stayed. That was fine with her. She had her work and her small piece of land and the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. It was enough. It had to be enough. 3 days later, Grant Patterson showed up at her door again. This time he was on foot, leading a mule that carried what looked like camping supplies and not much else. Lily was in her garden, pulling up the last of the summer squash before the next cold snap could damage them, and she stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. "Mr. Patterson," she said, keeping her voice neutral. "Miss Ashford." He stopped a respectful distance away. "I apologize for disturbing you again. I was wondering if you might be willing to sell me some of that smoked meat you have put up. I am heading north to work a cattle drive, and the cook we hired quit 2 days ago. Left us high and dry. I have been buying supplies where I can, and dried meat would see me through until I can hire on somewhere with proper meals." Lily considered this. "You are a trail cook." "No, madam. I am a cowboy, but I can cook enough to keep myself alive, and that is all I need right now." "Where is your camp?" "About 5 miles northwest, near the old mission ruins. There are 4 of us, moving a small herd up to New Mexico territory. Nothing fancy, just getting cattle to market before winter sets in hard." Lily nodded slowly. It was a common enough story. "I can sell you some bacon and sausage. How much do you need?" "What would $5 buy me?" "Quite a bit, if you are not feeding an army." His face relaxed into something approaching a smile. "Just me and 3 other hands who are getting mighty tired of beans and hardtack." "Come around back to the smokehouse," Lily said. "I will wrap it up for you." As she worked, selecting pieces and wrapping them in clean cloth, Grant watched with obvious interest. "You built this yourself?" he asked, nodding at the smokehouse. "I did. It is not as large as I would like, but it serves. It is good work. You have the dampers set just right. My mother would have approved." Lily glanced at him. "You said she had a smokehouse in Tennessee." "She did. Died when I was 15, though. Fever took her one winter." He said it simply, but she heard the old grief underneath. "My father sold the farm after that, took to drinking. I headed west when I was 17 and never went back. That must have been hard." "It was, but probably not harder than losing a husband and starting over in a place like this." Their eyes met, and for a moment there was an understanding between them that needed no words. They were both survivors, both people who had learned to keep moving when staying still would have meant drowning in loss. "Here," Lily said, handing him the wrapped packages. "This should last you a while. The sausages have some heat to them from the chilies, fair warning." "I like heat," Grant said, counting out coins into her hand. His fingers were calloused, scarred across the knuckles from rope work and 1,000 small injuries that came with cowboy life. "Thank you, Miss Ashford. This is kind of you." "It is business," Lily said, but she smiled when she said it. He smiled back, and it transformed his face, made him look younger and less worn. "Well, it is good business then." He was turning to leave when Lily heard herself say, "If you and your men want a proper meal before you head north, I could use the money. I make a good stew and I have bread baking tomorrow." Grant stopped, looked back at her with surprise. "That is generous. But it is a lot of work feeding for hungry cowboys. I have cooked for threshing crews before. 4 men is nothing. Besides, like I said, I could use the money." That was true enough, though Lily was not entirely sure why she had offered. Something about this quiet cowboy made her want to offer kindness, made her remember that not everything in life had to be about survival. "Then we would be honored," Grant said. "What time should we come?" "Evening. 6 o'clock after the heat breaks. We will be here, and Miss Ashford." "Thank you." After he left, Lily stood in her garden and wondered what she had just done. Inviting strange men to her home was not wise, but something in her gut told her Grant Patterson was not dangerous, just lonely. And perhaps she was more lonely than she wanted to admit. The next day passed in a flurry of cooking. Lily made a venison stew with potatoes and carrots, baked 3 loaves of bread, and even made a dried apple pie from the stores she had put up in the fall. It felt good to cook for people again, to remember that food was not just fuel but a kind of communion. Grant and his 3 companions arrived exactly at 6, all of them scrubbed clean and wearing what passed for their best clothes. Grant introduced them as they dismounted. Jack Ross, a grizzled man in his 40s with kind eyes; Diego Herrera, a young vaquero who could not have been more than 20; and Samuel Tucker, somewhere in his 30s with the weathered look of someone who had been working cattle his whole life. "Madam, this is incredibly kind of you," Samuel said, removing his hat. "We have been eating Jack's cooking for 3 weeks, and he will tell you himself it is nothing to write home about." "It keeps you alive," Jack said with a shrug. "That is all I claim." They ate at the rough wooden table Lily had set up outside, the evening air cooling to something pleasant as the sun dropped toward the horizon. The men ate with the focused intensity of people who rarely had a good meal, complimenting everything until Lily felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. It had been a long time since anyone had appreciated her cooking. "This is the best meal I have had since leaving San Antonio," Diego said, accepting a second helping of stew. "You should open a restaurant, Miss Ashford." "I am not sure San Elizario needs another restaurant," Lily said. "Besides, I like the quiet of living out here." "Did you homestead this land?" Samuel asked. "I bought it from a widow who was moving back east to live with her daughter. It is not much, just 20 acres, but it is mine." "That is more than a lot of people can say," Grant said quietly. He had been mostly silent during the meal, but Lily had caught him watching her several times, his expression thoughtful. As the meal wound down and the men helped clean up over Lily's protests, Grant lingered after the others had started back toward their horses. "I wanted to say again how much this meant," he said. "Not just the food, though that was wonderful, but the kindness of it. We are not used to that, most places we go. People should be kind to each other," Lily said simply. "God knows there is enough hardship without us making it worse." "You are right about that." Grant looked at the smokehouse, still sending up its thin line of smoke into the darkening sky. "You know, watching you work this place, it reminds me of something my mother used to say. She said that preserving food was like preserving family. You put in the work, you do it right, and it lasts. It keeps you through the hard times." Lily felt something tighten in her chest. "That is a lovely way to think about it." Grant looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them that made Lily's breath catch. "I keep thinking," he said slowly, "that some things are worth preserving. Some things you want to last forever, not just through winter. Like what? Lily asked, though her heart was beating faster. Like this. Like the feeling of sitting down to a meal with people who care about the small kindnesses. Like the way smoke looks rising from a smokehouse at sunset. Like. He paused, seemed to gather his courage. Like the way I have been thinking about you since I first rode up here 3 days ago. Lily opened her mouth, closed it, tried to find words. Mr. Patterson. Grant, please, Grant. You do not even know me. I know you are brave enough to build a life alone in hard country. I know you are kind enough to feed strangers. I know you work from sunup to sundown and still find time to experiment with chili peppers in your sausages. His voice was soft but steady. I know that I have been drifting for 8 years, and this is the first place that has felt like it might be worth stopping for. You have a cattle drive to finish, Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. I do. But we will be back through here in about 6 weeks after we sell the herd. I was hoping I could stop and see you again, if that would be all right. Lily looked at him, this weathered young cowboy with his honest eyes and his mother's memories of a Tennessee smokehouse, and felt something shift in her chest. She had told herself she was done with men, done with the risk of loss and heartbreak. But standing here in the cooling evening with the smell of mesquite smoke and bread and autumn air all around them, she felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Hope. I would like that, she said quietly. I would like that very much. The smile that spread across Grant's face was like sunrise. Then I will be back. 6 weeks, maybe less if we move the herd fast. I will be here. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took her hand. His palm was rough against hers, warm and solid. Thank you, Lily. For everything. Travel safe, Grant. She watched them ride away into the dusk, 4 cowboys heading north with their small herd, and felt the future shift into something new and uncertain. But uncertainty was not always bad. Sometimes it was just another word for possibility. The next 6 weeks passed slowly. Lily continued her work, smoking meat and tending her garden and trading in town, but her thoughts kept returning to Grant Patterson. She replayed their conversations, remembered the way he had looked at her smokehouse with appreciation, the way he had spoken about preservation and permanence. Part of her worried she was being foolish, pinning hopes on a drifting cowboy who might never return. But another part, the part that had driven her west and kept her going through loneliness and hard work, believed in the possibility of something good. November arrived with cooler winds and the threat of early frost. Lily harvested the last of her garden, pickled everything that could be pickled, and spent long hours in the smokehouse, building up her winter stores. The work was meditative, rhythmic, and it kept her hands busy when her mind wanted to wander. She was in town trading smoked sausages for coffee beans when she heard the news about the cattle thieves. 3 men, old Mr. Chen, who ran the general store, told her, shaking his head. They have been hitting ranches north of here, running off small herds. Killed a man up near Las Cruces last week when he tried to stop them. Lily felt her stomach drop. Las Cruces, that is in New Mexico territory. It is bad business. Rangers are looking for them, but you know how that goes. Lot of empty country to hide in. That night, Lily barely slept. Las Cruces was where Grant had been heading. She told herself it was a big territory, that the chances of him encountering these thieves were small. But fear had its own logic, and it kept her awake until dawn. 2 days later, Grant rode into her yard. He was alone, and even from a distance Lily could see something was wrong. He sat his horse stiffly, and when he dismounted, he moved like a man in pain. She was out of the house before he could take 3 steps, her heart pounding. Grant, what happened? I am all right, he said, but his face was pale under his tan, just a little banged up. You are bleeding." There was a dark stain on his shirt, half hidden by his vest. "It is not as bad as it looks. Get inside." Lily's voice left no room for argument. She had nursed Thomas through more than one accident on their Missouri farm, and she knew the stubborn way men tried to minimize their injuries. "Now, Grant Patterson, before you fall over." He did not argue, which told her how bad it really was. She helped him inside, settled him in the chair by the table, and carefully peeled back his vest and shirt. The wound was a knife slash across his ribs, not deep but long and ugly, already showing signs of infection. "This needs cleaning," Lily said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What happened?" "Cattle thieves. Same ones everyone has been talking about. They hit us 4 days north of here, tried to run off the herd. We fought them off, but—" He winced as she began cleaning the wound with whiskey. "One of them got me with a knife before Diego shot him. The other 2 ran." "Your friends?" "They are fine. We got the cattle to market, sold them, and headed back. The others are camped outside of town, but I wanted to come straight here." His eyes found hers. "I needed to see that you were all right." Something in Lily's chest squeezed tight. "I am fine, but you are not. This wound is infected. You should have seen a doctor in Las Cruces. We were in a hurry to get back. Besides, I have had worse." That is not reassuring. But Lily's hands were gentle as she worked, cleaning and bandaging the wound with strips of clean cloth. "You are going to stay here tonight so I can watch this. If the fever gets worse, we are getting a doctor." "Lily, I do not want to impose. You rode out here with an infected knife wound because you were worried about me. The least I can do is make sure you do not die of blood poisoning." "Now hush." A smile flickered across his pale face. "Yes, madam." She made him eat, then settled him on her bed, the only real bed in the small house, while she prepared to spend the night in the chair watching over him. The fever came on as night fell, making him restless and feverish. Lily bathed his face with cool water, changed the bandage twice, and spoke softly to him when he muttered in his delirium. Somewhere in the darkest part of the night, his hand found hers and held on tight. "Do not go," he mumbled, eyes closed, lost in fever dreams. "I am right here," Lily said. "I am not going anywhere, need to tell you, need to say. Shh, rest now. You can tell me everything when you are better." But he pushed forward anyway, the way fevered people do, speaking truths that waking minds might hide. "Love you, been thinking it for weeks. Knew it that first day, watching you stand there all fierce and capable. Love you, Lily." Lily's breath caught. She told herself it was just the fever talking, that she should not put stock in words spoken in delirium. But his hand held hers with such desperate certainty that she found herself squeezing back. "I am here," she whispered. "Just hold on." By morning the fever had broken. Grant woke slowly, confused and weak but clear-eyed. Lily was half asleep in the chair beside the bed, and he watched her for a long moment before speaking. "Lily," she jerked awake, immediately reaching to feel his forehead. It was cool, or at least cooler than it had been. "How do you feel?" "Like I got dragged behind a horse. But better than last night, I think." He looked around, realized he was in a bed, that dawn light was coming through the window. "I am sorry, I did not mean to. Do not apologize for being injured. Here, drink this." She held water to his lips, watched him drink gratefully. "The fever broke about 2 hours ago. I think you are past the worst of it, but you need rest. I should get back to camp. The others will worry. They can worry. You are not riding anywhere for at least 2 days. Grant looked like he might argue, but then he just nodded, exhausted. "You are stubborn." "I have been told that before." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. "Last night, did I say anything while I was fevered?" Lily considered lying, but something in his eyes made her tell the truth. "You said a lot of things, most of it did not make much sense." Did I say something about you, about how I feel?" Her heart beat faster. "You might have mentioned something along those lines." Grant closed his eyes, took a breath, opened them again. "I meant it. Every word. I know it is too fast. I know I have no right, but I meant it. Grant, let me say this, please." He struggled to sit up, and Lily helped him, propping pillows behind his back. "I have been drifting since I was 17 years old, never staying anywhere long, never letting myself get attached to places or people. I told myself that was freedom, but really it was just running. Running from losing people the way I lost my mother, my father, everyone I cared about." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Then I met you. And you were standing there by your smokehouse, this woman who had lost everything, and instead of running, you built something new. You made a life with your own hands. And I thought, that is what courage looks like. That is what I have been too scared to do." "You are not a coward," Lily said softly. "Maybe not. But I have been afraid. Afraid to stop, afraid to stay, afraid to want something permanent because permanent things can be lost." His hand tightened on hers. "But watching you work that smokehouse, preserving things to last through winter, it made me think maybe that is the point. Maybe you do the work anyway. Maybe you build something worth keeping even though nothing lasts forever." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "You said something like that before. The night you ate dinner here. I remember. I was trying to tell you then, but I did not have the courage." He looked at her with such naked honesty that it made her chest ache. "I love you, Lily Ashford. I want to stay here if you will have me. I want to help you work this land. I want to build a bigger smokehouse with you and raise cattle and maybe, if I am very lucky, build a family. I want to be preserved like that meat, kept and treasured and made to last." The tears spilled over then, and Lily did not bother wiping them away. "That is the most ridiculous romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Is that a yes? You are delirious and injured and you have known me for 6 weeks. That is not an answer." Lily laughed through her tears. "You infuriating man. Yes, yes, I will have you. Yes to all of it." The smile that broke across Grant's face was worth every moment of worry, every sleepless hour of the night before. He pulled her down to him, kissed her with such tenderness that she felt something in her soul shift and settle, like a foundation being laid for something permanent and true. "We should probably talk about practical matters," Lily said when they finally broke apart. "Like where you are going to sleep once you are well enough to get out of this bed. I was thinking I could build an addition onto the house, maybe a proper bedroom and a bigger kitchen. You are going to need more space if we are growing this operation. If you want a partner, in business and everything else." Lily thought about it, about sharing her hard-won independence, about trusting someone with the life she had built. But looking at Grant, seeing the hope and love and determination in his face, she found it was not hard at all. "Partners," she agreed. "In everything." The next weeks were a study in domestic adjustment. Grant healed slowly, stubborn about resting but yielding to Lily's no-nonsense care. His friends from the cattle drive visited, pleased to see him recovering and clearly charmed by Lily. Samuel Tucker joked that Grant had found himself the best possible nurse, while Diego taught Lily some vaquero songs, and Jack Ross offered advice on expanding the property. As Grant regained his strength, he and Lily began planning their future in earnest. He had money saved from years of cowboy work, and she had her land and her growing business. Together, they sketched plans for a larger smokehouse, discussed buying cattle in the spring, and debated how to expand the garden. They were married in December by the priest in San Elizario, with half the town in attendance. Lily wore a dress of deep blue that she had traded smoked ham for, and Grant wore his best clothes, looking nervous and proud in equal measure. Maria Domings, who had become Lily's close friend over the months, cried through the entire ceremony, while her husband Juan stood witness along with Samuel, Jack, and Diego. The winter that followed was the happiest time of Lily's life. She and Grant fell into rhythms of work and rest, learning each other's habits and quirks. He was patient and thoughtful, always asking her opinion before making changes, always treating her land as truly theirs. She found herself softening in ways she had not expected, laughing more, touching him casually as she passed, growing used to the comfort of not being alone. They worked the smokehouse together, and Grant proved to have inherited his mother's skill for the work. He could read the smoke and temperature by instinct, knew when to add wood and when to let it be. Lily loved watching him work, loved the care he took with everything he touched. "I was thinking," Grant said one cold January evening as they sat by the fire, "about what you said about the chili peppers. What if we tried growing some ourselves in the spring? Diego says his family has seeds for different varieties. We could experiment, see what works, maybe develop something unique. Ashford Patterson's special recipe smoked meats," Lily said with a smile, "has a ring to it." "It does." She leaned into him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "Grant, I am happy. I did not think I would be again after Thomas died, but I am." He kissed the top of her head. "So am I. Happier than I have been since I was a boy in Tennessee. You gave me that. We gave it to each other." Spring came with its usual burst of work. They plowed and planted, expanded the garden, and Grant built the larger smokehouse he had promised, this one with better ventilation and more hanging space. Samuel stopped by to help with the heavy work and stayed for dinner, regaling them with stories of his winter adventures. "You two look disgustingly happy," he said, accepting another helping of Lily's chili-spiced beans. "Makes me almost want to settle down myself." "You should," Grant said. "It is better than drifting. Maybe, but not all of us are lucky enough to stumble across a woman like Lily." "That is true," Grant agreed, catching Lily's eye and winking. In May, Lily realized she was pregnant. She told Grant one evening in the smokehouse where they were preparing a batch of summer sausage, and he went completely still. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without a doctor." "But yes, I am certain." Grant set down the knife he was holding very carefully, then pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "A baby. We are having a baby. Are you happy?" He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were wet. "Happy does not even begin to cover it." "Lily, you have given me everything. A home, a purpose, and now a family. How could I be anything but happy?" They prepared through the summer and fall, building a cradle, saving money, and making plans. The baby came in late January 1879. A healthy boy they named Thomas Grant Patterson, honoring both Lily's first husband and the new future they were building. Holding his son for the first time, Grant looked at Lily with such overwhelming love that she felt tears prick her eyes. "He is perfect," Grant whispered. "You are perfect. How did I get this lucky?" "We both got lucky," Lily said. "Now change his diaper. Partnership means everything, remember?" Grant laughed, the sound filling their small house with joy. "Yes, madam." The years that followed were full of work and love in equal measure. They expanded their operation, buying more land and cattle, building their reputation for the best smoked meats in West Texas. Diego hired on permanently, helping with the cattle and teaching Lily's chili plants the Spanish words he swore made them grow better. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived 2 years after Thomas, followed by another son, Henry, 2 years after that. Through it all, the smokehouse remained the heart of their operation and their lives. It was where Grant had first told Lily he loved her, where they had shared their dreams, where they worked side by side building something meant to last. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grant found Lily in the smokehouse, checking on a batch of ham that was nearly ready. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "You remember what I said to you that first night?" he asked. "About preservation. I remember everything you have ever said to me," Lily replied, leaning back into him. "I said I wanted to be preserved like that meat, kept and treasured and made to last." He turned her to face him. "I think we did it. Look at what we have built, Lily. This place, our children, our life. We made something that is going to last." Lily reached up to cup his face, this man who had ridden into her life wounded and stubborn and full of love. "You said something else, too, that I never forgot. You looked at the smoke rising from the smokehouse and you said, 'Preserve us like that forever.' I did say that, did not I? You did. And here we are, 10 years later, still being preserved, still lasting." Grant kissed her then, slow and sweet, with the smoke curling around them and the smell of mesquite and home filling the air. Outside, they could hear their children playing, their voices high and happy. Diego was singing to the cattle in the near pasture. The sun was setting over the Texas desert in shades of orange and gold. "Forever," Grant murmured against her lips, "just like I asked for." "Forever," Lily agreed. The years continued to pass with their mixture of work and joy and inevitable sorrow. They lost Diego to fever in 1885, and both wept for the young man who had become family. But his nephew came to work for them the next spring, and the connection continued. Samuel Tucker got married finally, to a widow from El Paso, and brought her to meet Grant and Lily, laughing about how he had been right to envy what they had built. Their children grew. Thomas proved to have his father's way with horses and his mother's business sense. Grace was quieter, spending hours in the kitchen perfecting her own recipes, dreaming of writing a cookbook someday. Henry was pure mischief and charm, always getting into scrapes and talking his way back out. In 1890, on a warm October evening very much like the one when Grant had first ridden into her yard, Lily stood in the smokehouse watching the smoke rise. She was 44 now, her hair showing gray, her hands marked by 12 years of hard work. But she was content in a way she had never imagined possible back when she was a widow of 23, building this life alone. Grant came to find her, moving slower than he once had after a horse had rolled on him the year before, but still strong, still present, still hers. "You are going to work yourself to death, woman," he said affectionately, says the man who was up before dawn checking on the new calves. "That is different." "How? It just is." Lily laughed, the sound easy and warm. They had had this argument 1,000 times, and it always ended the same way. "Come here, you stubborn man." He came, gathering her into his arms. They stood together in the smokehouse, breathing in smoke and history and all the years they had built together. "You ever regret it?" Grant asked quietly. "Letting a half-dead cowboy into your life, every single day," Lily said, then kissed him before he could protest. "I regret that it took you so long to find me. I regret all the years we did not have together, but regret saying yes to you, never, not for 1 second. Good. Because I am not going anywhere. I should hope not. Who else would help me smoke the winter meat?" They worked together as the sun set, adjusting dampers and checking temperature, moving with the practiced ease of people who knew each other's rhythms perfectly. When they finally headed back to the house, walking hand in hand through the cooling evening, their grown children were already there. Thomas had come for dinner with his new wife Mary, a rancher's daughter from Fabens. Grace had brought her latest recipe attempts for her mother to taste test. Henry was supposed to be there but was undoubtedly in town charming some young woman, as was his way. The house was full of noise and laughter, food and family. Lily cooked while Grant told stories, while Thomas and Mary talked about their plans to start their own ranch, while Grace scribbled notes in her recipe book. This was what they had built. Not just a business or a home, but a legacy. Something preserved and kept and treasured, made to last through seasons and years and whatever hardships came. Later, after everyone had gone home or to bed, Lily and Grant sat on the porch watching the stars. The smokehouse sent up its thin line of smoke into the night sky, steady and true. "I love you," Grant said, "not for the first time and not for the last. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." "I love you too," Lily said, "my stubborn, romantic cowboy who compared us to smoked meat. It is still the most romantic thing I have ever said." "It really is." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands, watching the smoke rise like prayers into the Texas night. Somewhere in the darkness, cattle lowed softly. A coyote called in the distance. The wind moved through the mesquite trees with a sound like water. This was their life. Hard-won, carefully built, lovingly preserved. It was not perfect. There had been losses and hardships, sorrows and struggles. But it was theirs, and it was real, and it was enough. More than enough. The years that followed brought their share of changes. Technology crept into West Texas slowly, but surely. Electric lights became available in San Elizario in 1895, though Lily and Grant were among the last to wire their house, preferring the familiar glow of oil lamps. The railroad expanded, making it easier to ship their products to distant markets. But some things stayed the same. The smokehouse still operated the old way, with mesquite wood and careful attention and recipes passed down through generations. Grant still worked cattle with Diego's nephew, now Diego's great-nephew as well. Lily still tended her chili pepper garden, now expanded to cover 2 full acres, developing varieties that people came from 3 counties over to buy. Their children built their own lives. Thomas and Mary had 3 children and a successful ranch near Fort Hancock. Grace married a schoolteacher from El Paso and published her cookbook in 1897, dedicating it to her mother and the flavors of West Texas. Henry, to everyone's surprise, settled down with a fierce little woman named Ruth who ran a boarding house in San Elizario, and they had twins before their first anniversary. In 1898, when America went to war with Spain, both Thomas and Henry tried to enlist. Grant, now 45 and grayer than he liked to admit, had to be physically restrained by Lily from saddling up to join them. In the end, neither son went. Thomas because of a childhood injury that had left him with a weak knee. Henry because Ruth announced she was pregnant again and he could not bear to leave her. "We got lucky," Lily said as they received the news that the war was ending, their sons safe at home. "So many mothers lost their boys." "We did get lucky," Grant agreed. "We have been lucky from the start." The new century arrived with celebration and uncertainty. San Elizario threw a party that lasted 2 days, and Grant and Lily attended with their children and grandchildren, now numbering 8. At midnight, on January 1st, 1900, Grant pulled Lily close and kissed her while fireworks burst over the Rio Grande. 22 years, he said. 22 years since I rode up to your smokehouse looking for a smithy. 22 years since I made the mistake of being kind to a stranger, Lily teased. Best mistake you ever made. Without question. They were in their 60s now, grandparents multiple times over, respected members of the community. Their smoked meats were famous throughout West Texas and into New Mexico and Arizona territories. They had built something that would outlast them, a business and a legacy that their children and grandchildren would carry forward. But more than that, they had built a love that had weathered everything life threw at it. Storms and droughts, illness and injury, loss and hardship. They had held on through all of it, had kept each other safe and whole and present. One evening in the spring of 1902, Lily was in the smokehouse preparing meat for Easter when she felt a strange tightness in her chest. She sat down on the bench Grant had built for her years ago, thinking it would pass. But the tightness grew, spreading down her arm, making it hard to breathe. She managed to call out, her voice weaker than she intended. Grant, he was there in seconds, had been working nearby. One look at her face and he was on his knees beside her. Lily, what is wrong? I think my heart. She could not finish the sentence. Grant scooped her up, carried her to the house, shouting for Henry, who lived closest. The next hours were a blur of doctors and worry and pain. But through it all, Grant never left her side, holding her hand, speaking softly to her, refusing to let her slip away. She survived. The doctor said it had been a mild heart episode, that she was lucky. But she needed to rest, to avoid stress, to let others do the heavy work. Lily, stubborn to the core, tried to argue. Grant shut her down immediately. You are not working yourself to death, he said firmly. I did not spend 24 years building this life with you just to lose you because you are too stubborn to rest. The children can handle the business. Diego's great-nephew knows the smokehouse as well as we do. You are going to rest and recover, and that is final. You cannot just order me around, Lily protested, but weakly. Watch me. I love you too much to be reasonable about this. So she rested, though it chafed. But as the weeks passed and her strength slowly returned, Lily found there was something peaceful about letting go. Their children were capable. The business would continue. She and Grant had done their work, had built something meant to last. Now they could simply be. They spent more time on the porch, watching sunsets and grandchildren. They took slow walks around the property, Grant's hand always ready to steady her. They talked about everything and nothing, falling into comfortable silences that spoke of decades of understanding. Do you remember what you said to me? Lily asked one evening as they watched the smoke rise from the smokehouse. That first week when you came to dinner, I said a lot of things that week, most of them embarrassingly romantic. You said you wanted to be preserved. That watching me work made you think about building something meant to last. She looked at him, this man who had been her partner in everything. We did it, Grant. We lasted. We did more than last, Grant said, pulling her close. We thrived. We built a family and a legacy. We loved each other through everything. He kissed her forehead gently. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still. They did have years, though not as many as they might have hoped. Lily's heart remained weak, requiring careful management. But she was present for the birth of her 11th grandchild and her 12th. She was there when Thomas expanded his ranch to 3,000 acres, when Grace's second cookbook became a bestseller, when Henry's twins graduated school. In the fall of 1907, as autumn painted the desert in golds and reds, Lily and Grant celebrated their 29th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party, inviting what seemed like half of West Texas. People came from El Paso and Las Cruces, from Fabens and Fort Hancock, to celebrate the couple who had become legendary for their smoked meats and their enduring love. Give us a speech, Thomas called out, and the crowd took up the cry. Grant stood slowly, pulling Lily up beside him. He looked out at the assembled crowd, at his children and grandchildren, at the friends and neighbors who had become family over the years. I am not much for speeches, he said, but I will say this. 29 years ago, I rode up to a woman's property looking for a smithy. I found something better. I found home. He looked at Lily, his eyes soft. This woman took a chance on a drifting cowboy with nothing to offer but calloused hands and a willingness to work. She taught me about building things that last. about putting in the work even when it is hard, about preserving what matters through the long winters. He squeezed her hand. She gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose. She gave me a life worth living. There were tears in the crowd now, and Lily felt her own eyes burning. So here is what I want to say to all of you, Grant continued. Find someone who makes you want to stop drifting. Find someone who teaches you about preservation and permanence. Find someone who works a smokehouse at sunset and makes you believe in forever. He turned fully to Lily. And if you are as lucky as me, hold on tight and never let go. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Lily pulled Grant down to kiss him, not caring that everyone was watching. I love you, she said against his lips. My ridiculous romantic cowboy. Love you too, he replied. My stubborn, determined wife. They danced that night, slowly and carefully, Grant supporting Lily as they swayed to music played by Diego's great-grandson on a guitar. Around them, their family danced and laughed and celebrated. The smokehouse sent up its steady stream of smoke, a constant presence that spoke of home and history and everything they had built. As the party wound down and grandchildren were carried to beds, as neighbors headed home and the stars came out in their millions, Grant and Lily sat on their porch alone. The night was cool and clear, perfect in the way that late autumn nights could be. Do you think we have more anniversaries ahead? Lily asked quietly. She was 72 now, her heart weak but still beating. Grant was 74, moving slower but still strong in the ways that mattered. I think we have however many we have, Grant said. And I intend to treasure every single one. Good answer. They sat in silence for a while and then Grant said, Lily, can I ask you something, anything? Are you afraid of dying, of this ending? Lily thought about it carefully. A little, she admitted. I do not want to leave you. I do not want to miss seeing the grandchildren grow up. But afraid? No, not really. She looked at him. We have had a good life, Grant, better than most people ever get. We loved each other well. We built something beautiful. Whatever comes next, I will face it without regret. I do not want you to go, Grant said, his voice rough. I know. And I will stay as long as I can. But when the time comes, promise me something, anything. Promise me you will keep living. Keep running the business, keep loving our family, keep eating Grace's terrible experimental recipes and pretending they are good. Grant laughed through tears. They really are terrible, are not they? Awful, but we love her anyway. Lily reached for his hand. Promise me, Grant. I need to know you will be all right. He was quiet for a long moment. I promise I will try. But Lily, you are my life. You have been my life since I was 26 years old. I do not know how to exist without you. Yes, you do. You did it before me and you can do it after if you have to. But let us not borrow trouble. I am still here. We still have time. They had 2 more years. 2 precious years of slow mornings and family dinners, of grandchildren's visits and quiet evenings on the porch. Lily's heart grew weaker, but she remained sharp and present, refusing to miss a moment of the life she loved. She died on a clear morning in May 1909, with Grant holding her hand and her children gathered around her bed. Her last words were, "It was a good life. We did well, my love." Grant, true to his promise, kept living. He ran the business with Thomas's help, played with his grandchildren, and attended every family gathering. But something in him had dimmed. Friends said he was half himself without Lily, a man waiting to join his wife. He died 2 years later in his sleep, with a smile on his face. Grace, who found him, said he looked peaceful, as if he had gone to meet someone he loved. They buried them together in the San Elizario cemetery, under a headstone that Thomas had specially carved. It read, Grant Patterson, 1852-1911 Lily Ashford Patterson, 1855-1909, Preserved like that forever, the business continued for 3 more generations, run by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The original smokehouse still stands, now a historical landmark, with a plaque telling the story of the couple who built an empire from smoke and determination and love. But more than the business, more than the legacy, what lasted was the story. The story of a widow and a cowboy who found each other in the hard country of West Texas, who worked side by side building something meant to last, who loved each other through everything life could throw at them. On quiet evenings, when the smoke rises from the old smokehouse, people in San Elizario still tell the story. They tell it to their children and grandchildren, keeping it alive the way Lily and Grant kept each other alive in their hearts. And somewhere in that smoke, in that persistent rising toward the sky, 2 souls remain preserved forever, held in the amber of memory and story, lasting like good meat through a long winter, nourishing everyone who remembers that love, when tended carefully and honestly, can last beyond death itself. The smokehouse still operates, now run by Thomas's great-granddaughter, a determined woman who carries Lily's name and her stubborn strength. She uses the original recipes, still flavored with those special chili peppers from seeds that trace back to Lily's first garden. When people ask about the history, she tells them about the woman who built a life alone and the cowboy who asked to be preserved like smoked meat. She tells them it is a love story, the best kind, the kind that lasts. And the smoke rises, steady and sure, carrying their story into the wide Texas sky, where it mingles with the wind and the stars and the eternal turning of seasons. Preserved like they asked, forever like they promised, together like they always were. In the end, that is what matters. Not the years or the hardships, not the struggles or the sorrows. What matters is that they loved each other well, that they built something beautiful together, that they kept their promise to be preserved like that forever, held safe in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and believed, even for a moment, that love could last beyond time itself. The smokehouse stands. The story continues. And somewhere in the smoke and memory, Grant and Lily Patterson remain, forever young, forever in love, forever preserved in the amber of a story that refuses to end. That is the true magic of preservation. Not just keeping things from spoiling, but holding them safe through the winters of time. Keeping them present and real and meaningful, generation after generation. Lily knew that when she built her first smokehouse. Grant understood it when he asked to be preserved. And together, they proved it, living a love that transcended the boundaries of life itself, becoming something eternal, something that would feed hungry hearts for as long as their story was told. And in San Elizario, Texas, with the smoke still rising from that old adobe smokehouse, their story continues to be told, a testament to the power of love and work and 2 people who promised each other forever and meant it with every fiber of their beings. They were preserved like that forever. Just like he asked, just like they deserved,